My name is David Batranu. I work at AutoWeb. I'm from Romania and have been working with Plone. Can I take this out? Ah. Okay. I've been working with Plone and Zope for about 10 or 11 years. And you kind of get used to doing stuff in a certain way, and it's hard to get out of that mindset. So the issue I had with the recent application was that it had to scale. It was a basic table, and it had to have a lot of entries and scale. Well, not a lot, but it still was pretty slow to add each content and stuff like that. So usually when you start working on an application in Plone, you think about how can I map this to content types? How can I introduce this directly into the Plone machinery and be completely integrated with everything? But your application doesn't necessarily need that. I mean, it's good. You get get a lot of stuff for free. You get the workflows. You get the security, you get, what do you get? You get the mails, right? The automated mails and all of that stuff. You can set up certain users. But you get too much stuff, and usually your application might not need everything, but Plone does everything either way if you use content types to manage your internals. So that's really, really slow. So this simple example would be let's say a table application. If you want to present some information, filter it, fetch it from somewhere. You would have a dexterity container for the table and some items, some contained items that let's call them table rows. You would go add new table row, fill in the fields, and then a custom view for the table container that would present these rows. And then you would have sorting and filtering from the catalog, which in certain cases can become stale and your entries would not update properly. So this is like how that would work, that would look like, right? Of course, you need to add the interfaces and register the ZCML files and everything. So in my case, I got really tired waiting for like half a second to add every single content type because my use case, I had a lot of being a more mature application. I had some event handlers that, and sorry, I had some too many event handlers, and I had the catalog that had big indexes. So the cataloging step was somewhere around 0.3 to 0.5 seconds for each content being added. So I looked into alternatives, and I found that the easiest way to add something into the ZODB is persistent. I thought it would be simple item, but simple item is not that simple. And the thing is that persistent objects are really, really fast because they're basically just simple. They're really close to the basic Python object classes. So in my use case, in our example use case, the table will still be a dexterity container because we would use that to interact with Plone and be able to add the application and set up views and even launch events for other stuff. Oh. So now we have an attribute on the table container, which is now an instance of a B tree with object keys and object values. And the table row is an instance of persistent. And you can sort and filter the data for display using just sort and filter from Python, because once you have such lightweight objects, you can actually iterate through them really, really fast, and that won't be a problem. The catalog would not be needed. So this is an example implementation. Table is a dexterity container. The rows, I added it with underscore rows because I just wanted to make sure nobody can accidentally access it through the URL. And instantiate it when accessing it the first time. And table row is a persistent object. Okay, so this is what I used it in. I had in use case production. The existing implementation was actually that's wrong, with an archetypes item with just a few fields, and the initial requirement was, I don't know, 20 objects in a container, and eventually that grew to something like hundreds of items, and they had to be managed in bulk. And we wrote a custom view to import data, and it was very slow because this was also a big portal, and it took about 1 second to add or update one item. And the average data set was something about 300 items. And it's really frustrating to manage data in this way if you have to go away for 10 minutes. And we even thought about using asynchronous jobs, and that's where red flags started and red lights started. Yeah. So we thought about it, and I implemented with persistent objects. I set the fields as attributes, just like before in the example, in B trees, and now it took less than a second to update 10,000 items. Not that we needed them, but we go from, I mean, not yet, but we went from 10 minutes to less than a second. So that's a really big improvement. We did not have to implement async. We cut a lot of the existing code, actually. And now server resources can be better used to do other stuff than wait around for 10 minutes. Another advantage to this approach is that non-Plone people can work on your application because they can just write normal Python objects. You just ask them to please use persistent, or you just port it over after the fact. And so you can expand your developer resources without having to teach them Plone. And it's really easier to test. You don't have to spin up a Plone instance with the database and all the packages. You can just test your implementation separately. But of course, the drawbacks are you don't have any permission checks. If you have a collection and you need user-based access or role-based access, you have to check them in your custom views and make sure you don't return any data they shouldn't access. You can't add, edit, or delete them through the web because they would no longer appear in the menu. But you can, of course, create management forms that they're not that hard to make, and you can even skip using Z3C form because that wastes a lot of time for me, at least. So it's not a content type. You lose everything that was content type related, but you can get most of that stuff back. Yeah, so not all applications need to follow this pattern. If you have a news item or stuff that you update rarely or not a lot of them, you can just follow the standard pattern because you get a lot of stuff for free. But if you need performance, if you have applications dealing with a lot of data, this would be extremely fast and easier to test, and a lot more people could work to develop it. If I have a little bit more time. Okay, I've set up a quick test implementation of how this would work. So, what? Stop, please. Alt F4. When in doubt. I don't know if you can see this. Is it visible?
Can you make it bigger?
I don't know. I can make the resolution bigger, I think. Okay, so I have this. Wait, I created a dexterity content type in Plone through the web interface, and here I have a browser view with two functions: one that adds dexterity items and one that adds persistent items, and one that returns the persistent. It returns 10 random persistent items because we're adding 10,000. And this is the persistent item. It's really simple. Whatever you pass in as keywords, it gets saved on itself. And I've set these here just for reference. Okay, I have a names list, which contains some data. And I will be adding them. Let's see. Would be adding 10 dexterity items. This is another package that logs everything that's going on. So added 10 items in 2.5597 seconds. That's not that bad, but this is a plain Plone site with nothing extra in it. No extra indexes, no extra anything. So this is, yeah. Let's see how fast it would be to add 10,000 items. 0.1 seconds. And this is the table. Just use some name data from a website. And we get random data. So yeah, this is what you can get. You can get much faster performance and simpler code if you're willing to lose some functionality that you might not need either way. So thank you. Questions?
While we're doing questions, is the next speaker here?
Yeah, he is.
Why don't you come on up and get set up? Does anybody have any questions? Sorry, I'll get to you next.
Have you looked at the super package, like the soup ER package? It has a similar approach, and yeah, we use that for the shop, for example, for all the order data and stuff like that.
No, I did not know about this package.
It's a quite similar approach.
Ah, okay. So we'll have to talk about this.
There's a Plone integration package as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, hi, just to understand, I mean, I didn't get it fully. So you have a dexterity content type, and then you take part of it and put into persistent.
The idea was to go away from the dexterity content type, and in that case, I had a table, which was a table container that contained table rows. Table row was a dexterity item.
Yes.
So I would end up having, let's say I needed 1,000 of those, and I have to update them.
Yes,
every
but I just didn't understand what you described. I mean, did you combine some
yes,
sort of?
So now the table, the container, contains an attribute, a B-tree attribute,
Yes.
which contains these persistent objects.
Yes. So this way you can have all the security based on dexterity, if I understand correctly.
You can,
And
but
then you
you have to be
reference something
careful
outside.
if you have a view that says list data, and it should be in according to whatever permission the user has. Maybe some people see something else.
Yes.
Then you have to filter what you send them.
Yes.
Because if you say just list everything, then
Yeah, that could be wrong. Yeah. Okay. But it's an interesting approach, at least.
thank you.
Any other questions? The next question.
I can just speak loudly if that's okay.
No, we want to get it on the recording.
So if you look at the method resolution order of a content type item from Plone content types, for example, there's 44 classes in there. And well, as expected, one is persistent. And why, if you say you want to add new functionality, like workflow, for example, or security, why do you not build your own content type by picking whatever, since it's built so modular, by picking what you think is your best, the lowest entry point for the minimum requirements that you have. I mean, simple item is not that complicated, I'd say, but there's, if you add more and more going up that the method resolution order, it gets more complicated and more heavy, especially if you go to CMF catalog aware and workflow aware. How many things did you actually add, and which of them did you add by hand? And why not use one of the modular elements that Zope and Plone provide?
I did not want to look through that whole thing, and what I added was a management page where I would add and delete and edit items, which is not that complicated. And yeah, no, that's I did not need workflows. I did not need anything else because everything would be implemented through the parent container. In my case.
And it makes total sense.
And you can even send custom events for the content rules if you want to send emails. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.